Now, when we are talking about what are some of the topics that we had discussed the other day, we had discussed certain topics about this chapter. So we were talking about what are the basic concepts of a cell. You know, the other day we studied. What can be the concept of a unicellular and multicellular organisms. So the last class we were talking about this. What are unicellular and multicellular organisms? Do you still remember one or two examples that we studied? What are unicellular, multicellular organisms? One example, unicellular, multicellular organisms. What did we study the other day? What did we learn? Paramecia. Amoeba. Multicellular. Parrot. Are we multicellular? Obviously. So when we are talking about unicellular, multicellular organisms, so we are on, did you sign? Take it. You have to ask for it. You have to, this is a sheet where all of you are supposed to sign. Otherwise, the absent message will go to your parents. Okay, and they'll come running searching for you all. So now when we are talking about the concept, where's your book? Take out your book, take out your notebook. So the concept of unicellular, multicellular, the other day we studied. What is the concept of a unicellular organism? A cell made up of only, or an organism made up of only one cell, where that single cell performs all the functions. That single cell will perform all the functions. But if I talk about a multicellular organism, a fish is there. I talk about a parrot is there. I talk about an animal, bigger animal is there. The plants are there. We, as a concept of multicellular organism, we also belong to the same category. So if this is what we are talking about, then we understand for us, there are a variety of cells. There are so many different types of cells in our body which are performing different functions. And also we revise the concept that the cells always come together to form tissues. And the tissues always come together to form organs, go that way. So this is what we were discussing, a concept of unicellular and multicellular organisms. What was the next concept we studied? Prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. Prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Did we write down these differences? Did I ask you to write down differences between the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cells? Did we write in the notebook? Yes. Did you write? Did you all write? You all were there the other class? Then how come she wrote and you all did not write? Did I give you? Or I gave you as homework? Gave you as homework. Okay. So when we are talking about the I asked you that it is already there in the volume, we will read and write. That is what. See, such a nice girl she is. And what you all are doing? Forgot absolutely? You were spared today because you are joining today. And she's writing now. Never mind. So those points you got the books? UT books, did you get? You have joined or you haven't joined? Okay. So you'll get the books today. Maybe today or tomorrow. Check out your volume also at the same time. And this concept of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Let us revise the points. The other day, I asked you to go through the points in the book also. Remember, to write it after you read the points. Write it on your own. Just not to copy there. Not to copy. By copying, you're not learning anything. So again, let us revise. I'll give you time to write. So when I talk about prokaryotic, what is the meaning of prokaryotic? A organism which has a nucleus not very well developed. Okay, I'll start from this topic again. I talk about a prokaryotic organism. What is a prokaryotic organism? I'm talking about a bacteria, where in this bacteria, I get to see that, of course, it is a single-celled organism, and the hereditary material is something like this, a single thread-like structure. It is a single thread-like structure, extensively coiled, present almost scattered in the cytoplasm, not at all wrapped by any membrane, any cover, any wall. And what do we call this thread-like structure as, which contains the hereditary information? What do you understand by hereditary information when I say information which passes from one generation to the other? information which passes from one generation to the other. So I'm saying that at the center of the cell, there is a single long thread-like structure, and this single long thread-like structure is known as the chromatin fiber. How many of them? Only one. Extensively long and extensively coiled. And it is present almost scattered in the cytoplasm, not wrapped up by any wall, any membrane. And this particular cell, apart from this, it has almost nothing apart from certain other granular structures and some cytoplasm. That is what the cell is. Again, come to this concept, the chromatin fiber. What does this chromatin fiber contain? It contains information for what should be the color of our skin, what should be the color of our eye, what should be the texture of our hair, what should be the height, what should be the characteristics of the enzymes and the proteins in our body, etc., etc. So all the different type of information is all here in this thread-like structure, and these informations are going to get passed on from one generation to the other, and this is what we call it as hereditary information. These are called hereditary information. But I'm supposed to now more or less compare this single-celled organism with our cells that we have. So if I have to draw any animal cell, then I'm supposed to draw a centralized nucleus, more or less at the center. And this nuclear region, almost at the center, what is it going to possess? It will contain a whole lot of thread-like structures. Now, it is not a single thread-like structure, but there are a number of these thread-like structures, and these thread-like structures are, of course, also coiled, but there may be 20 or 30 or 40 of them, and then each of them are coiled to form a ball of wool-like structures, but here it is only single one. And apart from that, I already told you that there's a wall-like structure here, a membrane is there, and this is what is known as the nuclear membrane. This is what is known as the nuclear membrane. So here, there are two compartments. One is the cytoplasmic region and one is the nuclear region in this type of cells. Can I say this? No, in this cell there is nothing. There are no two such structure, two compartments as such. And such type of a cell, the nuclear region is basically known as nucleoid. This is what is known as nucleoid. And here what am I going to say? It is a proper nucleus because the nuclear membrane is there and then the hereditary material is there. And now I'm going to talk about this as nucleus. It is a proper nucleus. Nucleoid and nucleus. Okay. And what are the other features for the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic you are supposed to remember? If it is a well-developed cell like the eukaryotic cell, in the cytoplasmic region, the cell is supposed to have many other parts of the cell. I will talk about certain structures known as the mitochondria. We will learn about all of them. Mitochondria present some tubular structures known as the endoplasmic reticulum present. Some small vacuolar structures are present there. At the same time, some particular structures known for cell division are present there, and so many more. I'm just roughly trying to, we have to draw them all very nicely. So there are a large number of such type of structures, and this has got a separate function, 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 and so on, exactly like the organs of our body. We have got the kidney for a separate function, heart for a separate function, brain for a separate function, yes or no? So exactly that way, when I talk about the cell, the parts of the cell also has got different functions to perform. Hence, since they are small, but parts of a cell, these are known as organelles. Not organs, but organelles. These are known as cell organelles. So what are cell organelles? Parts of a cell, and which perform various functions. Different functions they perform. So this was about the concept of prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Your homework again remains the same for those of you having that. You will read the points from the book, from the volume. You will read the, once you get the volume. You will read the points from the volume and write down the same in your note. Anything that you have to ask here regarding the concept of unicellular organism, multicellular organism, prokaryotic, eukaryotic. So this is the first concept of the chapter. This is the first part of the chapter. Apart from that, you are also supposed to remember certain important introductory concepts the other day that I told you, that who coined the term cell, that is about Robert Hooke to understand. Robert Hooke had understood certain type of structures in the What type of tissues he had worked on? The cork cells of the plants, the dead cells of the plants, the bark cells of the plants. And he understood that there are some compartment-like structures, there are some box-like structures as if in the plant tissues. There are some box-like structures in the plant tissues. And these box-like structures in the plant tissues has got certain internal structures, which later was known as the nucleus and so many other parts. So that is how the concept of cells came into existence. But the structure of the nucleus was in detail given by another biologist known as Robert Brown. Now that I talk about the nucleus, Robert Hooke had introduced the concept of cells. And Robert Brown was another famous biologist who had explained the structure of the nucleus present inside the cell. Okay, so these are some names that you have to remember. Now, today we are going to talk about the structure of animal cell. What does the animal cell contain? And what are the parts? What are their functions? You have to take out your notebook, take out your pencil. Do you have pencils today? All of you? Okay, take out your notebook, write on the name of the chapter. Take out your pencils. First of all, we are going to draw the diagram of the animal cell and then learn all the different type of functions of the organelles. Your diagram should be almost half of the page that you draw. When you are drawing the diagram should not be too small or at the same time should not be huge big. How am I supposed to draw the diagram? When I draw the diagram, make it a point that your notebook page, half of the page should be your diagram. Now this is quite a big diagram. You cannot draw it very small. Your diagram should be half of the page, neat, drawn with the pencil. When you draw the diagram, also certain things to remember, that if this is the page, how should you draw the diagram? Am I supposed to draw the diagram small? No. My diagram should be at least half of the page, consuming half of the page. Then only your diagram becomes neat. At the same time, the diagram should not be exactly in the middle, little bit towards this side. I will draw my diagram here so that there is enough space to write down the parts on the right. And try to put all your labels, as many as possible, on the right. So when you draw the diagram, that you have to plan also accordingly and draw the structures. This one is the diagram. You have to practice this diagram because you're often asked to draw this diagram during your exams. So, at times, of course, to practice this diagram, there are some few diagrams in this chapter and also in the next chapter that from time to time we should practice. Now, are you able to find out this difference between the smooth and the rough endoplasmic reticulum? If this blue color is not very prominent, I just try to mark it with red. So when you draw these tubular structures, on the outer wall of these tubules, you are supposed to draw some dot-like structures. This is another organelle altogether. This dot-like structures that I had marked, let me just mark them as ribosomes. This is another cell organelle altogether, ribosomes. So this is the structure of an animal cell that we have drawn. And now if you compare, you are very well able to understand that this is a true eukaryotic cell. No? This particular cell has got so many parts inside, known as a cell organelles. And at the same time, they have got a well-formed nucleus where you get to see the chromatic material is there, the cytoplasm is there, the nucleolus is there, and the membranes. Now we're going to learn the cell organelles and their individual structure and function. So we're going to start with the cell organelles now, and let us see what are some of the special features that we have to understand about each of them and what type of functions we are supposed to learn. The first we talk about the cell organelles. I already mentioned what are cell organelles, what do you understand by cell organelles, and what about some structural features that we are going to study. The structure, the composition that we are going to study, and one or two functions that you have to always remember, and that is how you are asked also questions. So let us get started. The first cell organelle, let us take up is the first cell organelle that we are going to talk about will be the cell membrane. The cell membrane. Try to locate each one of these parts as we discuss cell membrane. The cell membrane is also known as the plasma membrane. It's one and the same thing, remember, the cell membrane or the plasma membrane that I talk about. What about the structure or the composition? The cell membrane is actually semi-fluid in nature. The cell membrane is actually not solid, remember. It is almost semi-fluid in nature. And this cell membrane, say suppose I talk about this particular structure, I magnify this structure to see how exactly the cell membrane looks like. I get to see that the cell membrane has a structure something like this, with two layers of lipid molecules. Two layers of lipid molecules. What is the meaning of lipid molecules? Lipids are basically fat substances, fatty substances. Fat substances, when I say, you understand, these are certain type of composition coming from oil and all this type of substances, oil and ghee and butter and cheese. We understand fats. So composition something that way. Okay. So this layer, which looks just like a thin sheet, is actually not a dry sheet or a very thin sheet. It is quite broad, quite complex structure it is, made up of two layers. Now, what is this particular layer called? This particular layer is called the lipid layer. This particular layer is called the lipid layer. So if I'm talking about the upper layer, what I'm going to name this layer as, this layer would be termed as the lipid layer. And in between the lipids, if I show you, in between the lipids, there are different arrangements of proteins. Some proteins are arranged this way. Some proteins are arranged spanning the entire width. Some proteins are almost entire width, and some proteins are just embedded inside. That from this outer surface, we cannot see them. Something like, if I absolutely through the layer, and some proteins are inside. So when I see from here, I'm not able to see this, but this and this partially I'm able to see. So that is what I want to tell you. So when I talk about this layer of the plasma membrane, what is it made up of? It is made up of two layers of lipids. It is made up of two layers of lipids and one layer of protein, two layers of lipids and one layer of protein. But when we are talking about the protein may be arranged in different manner. Some this way from the top partially, some complete width, and some completely inside that we cannot see. And this structure of the plasma membrane is quite comparable to the mosaic floors that we get to see, the mosaic floor. The mosaic floor even today also we get to see in many different buildings and houses and hotels, etc. Where this is a typical type of a construction of the flooring, if at all. I think all of you must have seen somewhere or the other, where we get to see white cemented floor with some marble chips, colored marble chips we get to see. So in this process of making the floor, why is it known as fluid mosaic? Is because the consistency is fluid, I already told you, it is not solid. And mosaic, why? Because it almost looks like that. If you look into one magnified structure, part of this membrane, it looks like that because the proteins, some of them are popping out, some of them you cannot see, it is absolutely inside. And it is exactly like the mosaic floor. And when they make the mosaic floor, how do they do? They put one layer of white cement, and then they throw the marble chips, and then another layer of the cement, and they keep on polishing. So in that process of polishing, some of the proteins are already inside, which you cannot see. So when I'm looking at the floor, I'm only able to see some proteins which are a little bit outside, some proteins which are again partially outside, mostly inside. So I'm able to see only these proteins, and I'm not able to see this. I'm not able to see this marble chips, just like that. So that's why they compared it with the concept of mosaic flooring. So what is the composition? We say the composition is lipoprotein. What is the composition termed as? In short, the composition of plasma membrane terms to be made up of, it's a lipoprotein layer. What is the meaning of lipoprotein layer? Made up of two layers of lipids and one layer of protein. What are some of the functions of the plasma membrane? The functions of the plasma membrane would be, it holds the cells. When we are talking about the plasma membrane, very well acts as a wall. The plasma membrane is very much acting as a wall. Just imagine if the plasma membrane is broken, say, torn at one particular region. What will happen? The cytoplasm and everything will start flowing out. And now will the cell be able to perform any function? Of course not. The cell is damaged, the cell is dead. So that's the reason we say that it contains together. Does it give a proper shape to the cell? Of course, it also gives a proper shape to the cell. And next is, it also allows the process of protection. So many different type of unwanted substances cannot enter the cell, cannot leave the cell also. And one of the most important property that we are going to learn now is the semi-permeability concept. What is the meaning of semi-permeable? The plasma membrane is always known to be semi-permeable. Why? Right on there. Write down there. This you are always asked to explain also for 1 mark, 2 mark. Why is the plasma membrane known to be semi-permeable? Write down there. The plasma membrane, right? The plasma membrane allows the transfer of certain molecules in and out of the cell. Allows the transfer of certain molecules in and out of the cell. Allows the transfer of certain molecules in and out of the cell, and also prevents the movement of certain molecules. Through it. So it does not allow the movement of a variety of molecules through it, but at the same time it allows the movement of some. So that is what we are talking about, the plasma membrane. That is about the plasma membrane that you understand. The next organelle that we talk about would be the nucleus. Let us now talk about another cell organelle, that is the nucleus. Now this nucleus is actually known as the director of cell. It is known as the director of the cell. Why is it known as the director of the cell? Because this nucleus can direct all other cell organelles. What type of function the cell organelles should do? What should they produce? How much should they produce? What type of molecules should they allow enter? Should not allow enter? Everything is been controlled by the nucleus. Let us learn certain points regarding the structure, composition. So when we are talking about the nucleus, look into the structure of the nucleus. What are the parts of the nucleus there? The nucleus consists of a double wall. It has a double wall nuclear membrane. It has a double wall nuclear membrane, and the nuclear membrane also has same composition as the plasma membrane. So what is the composition of the membrane? The composition of the plasma membrane is lipoprotein. So here we are going to also write down the composition of the nuclear membrane is also lipoprotein. So when we are talking about the composition of the plasma membrane and the nuclear membrane is not separate, it's almost the same. But only that when I talk about the plasma membrane, it is actually single layer. It is not double layer. But the nuclear membrane, see how I have drawn it double layer. Then there are chromatin threads. Very well, you can see the chromatin threads here. So when I talk about the chromatin threads, what is the function of the chromatin threads here? What are these chromatin threads doing? These chromatin threads that we talk about, the chromatin fibers that we talk about, what do they contain? They carry hereditary information. So what is the meaning of this, that they carry hereditary information? When I talk about these chromatin threads, always remember, now that I'm talking about these chromatin threads are going to prepare certain chemical components, meaning these chromatin threads inside the nucleus can undergo various different types of metabolic processes, detailed, elaborate processes they undergo, and ultimately they result in the formation of protein chains. And these protein chains will come out through this nuclear pore. Now these are known as the nuclear pores, the openings. And these proteins will come out through the nuclear pore, come into the cytoplasm, and show variety of other functions, and result in the formation of so many characters that we exhibit. Now, what do we understand the word character when I say? In the concept of biology, when I say character, in the concept of biology, I said just now that the chromatin carry hereditary information and results in the formation of proteins. But how does it regulate hereditary information? It is only that this chromatin carry variety of information for the formation of variety of proteins. And one protein is responsible for the eye color, responsible for our height, another protein responsible for whether We love to read or not. Another protein responsible, what should be the amount of hemoglobin? Another protein responsible for, so are we short-tempered or we are cool? Remember, everything is a character in the concept of biology. Otherwise, when we talk about the general meaning of character, it means what type of a nature we have. It's not so. But in the concept of biology, character means everything. I love to play music, that is also a character. I don't love certain type of a food, that is also a character. The shape of my eyes, nose, that is also a character. So, and that is all because of the information in the chromatin fiber. Everything. Now, whatever information I have in my nucleus, from where did I get? From my parents. From where did my parents get? From their parents. So that is what we talk about as hereditary information, because it keeps on passing from one generation to the other. And it will go on and on from our generation to the next and to the next and to the next. So that is what we are talking about as the chromatin threads. What does the chromatin threads carry? They carry hereditary information. This nucleus, when we have to understand other certain features of the nucleus, something more that we talk about, that the nucleus also has got the nucleolus. What is this nucleolus? We are still talking about the structure. The nucleus also has got the nucleolus, which is a dark region inside the nucleus, and it is made up of a specialized substance known as the RNA and protein. The nucleolus is very prominent when the cell is mature and ready for the process of division. But other times it may not be there also. So this nucleolus is a storehouse, or it is a particular region extremely rich or extremely concentrated with RNA. Now, RNA is a complex molecule that the cell possesses, a ribonucleic acid. So this RNA and proteins together start concentrating in the cell when the cell has to divide. When the cell has already undergone the process of division, this may not be there for a long time. So what is this nucleolus made up of? What is nucleolus? A dark stable region consisting of RNA and protein. That is what you are supposed to remember. What are some of the functions of the nucleus? Let us write down. What are some of the functions of the nucleus? Regulates functions of all other cell organelles. Regulates the functions of all other cell organelles. What else? It also helps in transmitting hereditary characteristics. It also helps in transmitting hereditary characteristics from one generation to another. From one generation to another. So these are at least one or two functions that of course you should know. So whenever we are talking about the nucleus, I said, what should be the function of other organelles is also regulated by the nucleus by the way of the chromosomes. Chromatin. And this is a function, obviously, you have to remember whenever you talk about nucleus. What does the nucleus perform? What type of function the nucleus carry out? Next is, this is over, we talk about the nucleus. Now we move on to another cell organelle known as the mitochondria. Now the mitochondria is again a very, very important organelle of the cell. So when I'm talking about the mitochondria, let us check what are some of the properties that we have to talk about. Mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. What is the mitochondria known as? The mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. Powerhouse of the cell. Why is the mitochondria known as the powerhouse of the cell? There are certain features. Now, first of all, let us look at the structure. What to remember about the structure of the mitochondria? So when I'm talking about the mitochondria, look at the structure of the mitochondria. The mitochondria has, if I draw this mitochondria a little bit in detail, because this points very well you are supposed to understand. I'm talking about the mitochondria where you can very well see that there are two membranes. Yes or no? You can very well see that there are two membranes that I have drawn, and the outer membrane is smooth and even. But this inner membrane, it is folded. No? The inner membrane is folded, and this is what you are supposed to draw. And this inner membrane, what is this inner membrane known as? This inner membrane is known as crista. Crista, single, if I am talking about. And many, if I'm talking about, then I will write cristae. So what are the folds of the inner membrane of the mitochondria known as? The folds of the inner membrane of the mitochondria is known as crista. So what are the points to remember? The mitochondria is double-walled. The mitochondria is double-walled. It has got two walls. All cell organelles don't have double walls, remember? Double wall. And the inner wall is what? The inner wall is folded. The inner wall folded. And what are those folds called? The folds are called what? The folds are called the cristae. The folds are called cristae. But what is present in the cristae? Why are we talking about the cristae right now? We are talking about the cristae right now because on the cristae there are some studs like this. There are some specialized knob-like structures like this. And in these knob-like structures, the synthesis, the formation of ATP takes place. Because since we are talking about mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, then we should also understand what is this mitochondria actually doing. It is helping in the process of formation of the energy molecule. And energy molecule in the form of what? In the form of ATP. Energy molecule in the form of ATP, yes or no? So now that we are talking about the structure, what is the crista? What are crista or the cristae? Cristae are the site of ATP formation. Cristae are the site of ATP formation. What is the full form of ATP? The full form of ATP, you should remember, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. So that is the function of, that is the full form of ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. You have to write down this. Adenosine, some of these important terms you keep writing. You will not get in your book or these in the volume. Majorly you will get all this in the form of points. So some of these important terms you write so that you understand when you study on what you should focus. You are not supposed to in the 9th and the 10th standard. You cannot just open the NCERT book and read. You will not understand from where to start and when to end. You will not be able to frame good answers that way. So everything we have given in the volume. So remember which parts, which words that we teachers will be speaking in the class. These are the words that you have to put a focus on. Remember, write and practice also all these new terms so that you write it correctly. Function of the mitochondria, let us very well complete it in a minute. So when we are talking about the function of the mitochondria, what is the function of the mitochondria? The most important function of the mitochondria is the synthesis of the ATP, powerhouse of cell again. It is constantly producing energy molecule in those folds. And what else? It is also involved in the secretion of a variety. It is also involved in the secretion of variety of proteins. It is also involved in the secretion of variety of proteins. It also helps in the formation of variety of proteins. One thing that I forgot to mention is that when I talk about the mitochondria has got its own DNA. A single long chromatin-like fiber containing the DNA is also present in the mitochondria. Of course, we have been talking about chromatin in the nucleus, but mitochondria is one such organelle which has got its own DNA. So what is this what is this DNA known as? This is known as mitochondrial DNA. Then what is the job? What is the function of this mitochondrial DNA? Since it has got mitochondrial DNA, that's the reason it can produce so many variety of proteins necessary for its own function. And this energy molecule, remember, is also necessary for and break down or bring about cellular oxidation and bring about cellular oxidation. So these are the functions. 3 functions I have discussed here. So these are the 3 functions that we have to remember. Okay. So remember to underline these functions also in the volume as you have all of you should have your volume also when you attend the class. And from time to time carry your textbooks because I will ask you to read. Maybe you can do the reading part at home also if you don't want to carry your textbooks. Read so that you are able to understand if at all there is anything doubtful. Okay. The first 3 pages I think we have already covered. Read those parts. Okay. We continue next.
बुक्स से अच्छे बनाए हैं